Good evening, and boy, do we have a special episode today. Because you see, over the past 2.5 years now, a lot more people have come to the realization that big pharmaceutical companies routinely hide their clinical trial data from the rest of society. However, this is actually not a new phenomenon. In fact, according to Dr. John Abramson, who both published a phenomenal book called Sickening, How Big Pharma Broke American Healthcare, and he has also been involved in lawsuits against Big Pharma for the last several decades now, well, according to him, it turns out that there is in place right now a convoluted system that allows big pharmaceutical companies to bankroll their own clinical trials, have the results of those trials be published in peer-reviewed medical journals, even though those journals actually never see the actual clinical data. And instead of the data, those medical journals instead see hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of preprint sales coming to them from the very same pharmaceutical companies from which they're publishing. Take a listen.
And doctors don't understand what FDA approval means. FDA approval tells doctors what drugs they can prescribe, but the FDA does not tell doctors what drugs they should prescribe. Nor does the FDA has the data, though they won't release it. They're legally not allowed to release the confidential data. But the FDA has the data, and situations I've become aware of in litigation where journal articles misrepresented the data, and the FDA knew that the journals were misrepresenting the data, and the FDA knew that doctors were relying on the misrepresented data to prescribe the drug, and the FDA won't correct those articles. They remain silent on that. So the FDA is not guiding doctors on what drugs are going to be most therapeutic for their patients and most cost-effective for their patients. For that, the other wealthy countries have what's called health technology assessment, an independent governmental or quasi-governmental agency that gets all the data that's available, assesses the data, makes an independent analysis about the clinical and economic value of a drug, and then makes recommendations to doctors and to insurers to suggest which drugs would be most effective. The one thing that is not covered in that is that the drug companies now pay for about 86% of the clinical trials about their products. And it is assumed since the mid-1600s, when the Royal Society of London formed by the scientists who were figuring out how to make a steam engine, and that gravity explains the orbit of the Earth around the sun, they adopted the motto nullius in verba, which means take nobody's word for it. Now what happens is the drug companies are given the total control over that data, and they do not have to reveal it unless there's litigation that requires them to, and even then the experts have to sign protective orders. And the very rare case that goes to trial, we get to see all the data, and that data's in a lot of that's in the book, Sickening. But the drug companies control that data. So essentially, markets can't function. When markets decide whether a drug is worth buying, say an insurance company is deciding whether they should cover a drug and whether it's worth providing this for their subscribers, whether they're spending their subscribers' money well, the insurer can't know what the benefit of the bargain is for the user of the drug because they can't have the data. They don't have independent analysis of the data. So we've got a situation where the drug companies are allowed to control what doctors think they know, but in fact they don't know because they haven't had access to the data. The drug companies are allowed to control that data, and the doctors and the insurers and the health policy people don't understand the extent to which the drug companies are perpetrating the illusion that what they're presenting is science, when in fact it's marketing. It's their version of the science, but it's not independently vetted.
Now that is shocking. Let me ask you this question. If the pharmaceutical companies, these big pharmaceutical companies have access to their data, they don't have to hand it over to the journals, but it seems like from what you said, they do have to hand it over to the FDA. And in the example you gave, why did the FDA, seeing that what the journals were publishing was not consistent with the actual data, why did they choose to not step in and correct the record?
I can't answer that question, but I can tell you that at a faculty ethics seminar at Harvard Medical School. Janet Woodcock, who was up until recently the acting commissioner of the FDA, who had been the director of the division of the FDA that approves new drugs, came and presented. And I said to her, with all due respect, I want to ask you a question, because it's kind of an inflammatory question, but she said, go ahead. And I said, the article that Pfizer published in the Journal of the American Medical Association claimed that Celebrex, this is when Celebrex first came out in 2000, claimed that Celebrex was a better drug, anti-inflammatory drug than over-the-counter drugs because it caused fewer serious GI problems. And the FDA reviewers found that the Pfizer only published 6 months of trial data when it was a 12-month trial, and all the trial had been completed when the study was analyzed and sent in. So the FDA reviewers had said, we're not accepting the 6-month trial data, meaning we're not accepting the findings in JAMA. And I asked Dr. Woodcock, why didn't the FDA jump in? This was a big deal. There was a lot of people, a lot of doctors prescribing Celebrex based on a false belief. And she just said, that's not our job. We don't do that.
But then it seems like if the FDA is the only agency outside of the big pharma companies themselves that have access to the data, whose job is it in that case? Or are you saying that there is no agency in America that has this capacity, but that in other countries they do have agencies that have that role?
Exactly.
I see.
Exactly. And that combines with the idea that we don't have price controls and all the other countries have price controls on brand name drugs, so that in the United States, brand name drugs cost 3.5 times more than in the other OECD countries. So there's an enormous change in the reward to be gained from aggressive marketing in the United States compared to in the other countries. And that explains why we have much quicker use of new drugs without adequate evidence that they're superior.
Now, that was just a short snippet from the full interview, which for your reference is about an hour long. And in the full interview, we go into much, much greater depth about how 86% of clinical trials are actually paid for by these drug companies, how the tail is essentially wagging the dog in terms of how the FDA is essentially forced to only focus on whatever big pharma is researching rather than potentially natural solutions, how big pharma's marketing actually fueled the opioid epidemic, and so much more. However, it goes without saying that YouTube is sadly not a hospitable place for such an interview, despite the fact that everything we discuss is properly sourced and properly predicated. Regardless, that's just the reality of the world we live in. And so, if you'd like to check out that awesome interview in its glorious entirety, you can do so over on Epoch TV, which is our no censorship video platform. The link will be right there to the full interview at the very top of the description box. I hope you check it out. And now, sorry, what's this? Roman, it's me. Of course it's Sekur, because we use the Sekur app, which is the sponsor of today's episode, as well as an awesome email and message service provider that actually cares about your privacy. Now listen, it's no big secret that our data is being mined and remined all the time. In fact, there was a recent study that was published in the year 2020, which found that 155 million Americans, likely including you and me, have suffered some form of data breach. And frankly, that's only what's publicly known. However, all those past problems with privacy issues and data mining, well, that can be an issue of the past, because moving forward, you can use the Sekur app, which both your messages, your emails, and your phone calls can remain private. That's because they have their servers and their data centers located in Switzerland instead of in the US or China or Russia. And why does that matter? Because Switzerland has the strictest data privacy laws in the entire world, and they are not subject to the intrusive Cloud Act. Now, what I love the most about the Sekur app is that they don't collect my data, they don't mine my data, they don't mine the data and phone numbers of my friends and family. Everything is private. And best of all, at least in my opinion, this does not work with your big tech email provider just because it is not secure. And so check it out. You can head on over to Sekur.com, and if you use promo code Roman, you can get 25% off. And frankly, their rates are not even that expensive. It only starts with $5 for the messenger and $10 for the email and messenger combo. And best of all, they offer a 7-day free trial. And so again, I hope you check out that full interview. The link will be right there at the very top of the description box. And then until next time, I'm your host, Roman from the Epoch Times. Stay informed, and most importantly, stay free.